Get your filthy hands off my son. The scream tore through the courtyard of Atherton Preparatory Academy like a gunshot, shattering the serene, upscale atmosphere like a stone thrown into a glassy lake. Amid manicured lawns, marble Greek statues, and ivy-covered red brick walls, a man in a jet-black suit, shiny as a polished watermelon rind, charged forward like a predator. Caleb Sterling, real estate tycoon, the Academy's largest benefactor. A man whose nod could make or break a teacher's future or erase a student's name from the roster in an instant. In his arms was young Leo Sterling, face pale and small, clinging desperately to the shirt of Elias Vance. Elias, still standing, was the man who'd just been yelled at. Worn blue janitor's uniform, scuffed shoes, dust-stained hands. Hands that had caught Leo just moments earlier as the boy slipped from the marble steps. Elias didn't let go right away. He held the child's shoulder gently, as if to make sure the fragile breath within him was still there. He looked at Caleb, not with fear, not even anger, but with a calm, piercing stare. Cold, precise, like an X-ray scanning a malignant tumor. "I told you," Caleb hissed, yanking Leo from Elias as if the boy were a possession defiled by an unworthy touch. Leo began to cry. Not from the fall, but from being ripped from the only arms that had dared to protect him. "Dad, Mr. Elias caught me. I couldn't breathe." The words came soft and shaking, like a needle piercing through the gleaming mask Caleb wore to cocktail parties and charity galas. But he ignored them. As always, his son's voice was nothing more than background noise. People began to gather. Parents in couture dresses and Rolex watches. Teachers in tailored blazers. Students in pristine white and blue uniforms, like models from an Ivy League catalog. No one spoke. They just watched. Some pretended to check their phones. Others turned away. But everyone heard it. Filthy hands. The words landed like a razor slash across Elias's identity. He was no longer Dr. Elias Vance, the man once dubbed the miracle hands of pediatric neurosurgery. No longer the one who received standing ovations for life-saving innovations. He was just a black janitor, a ghost in the glittering machine of elite academia. Someone only noticed when the bathroom stank or there was blood on the courtyard tiles. Shame wasn't just a feeling. It was physical. It choked his throat, burned his neck, and seared down his spine. Those stares didn't accuse. They conspired in silence. Elias looked down at his hands. Once the hands that gave crippled children the chance to walk. And now they were called filthy. The headmaster appeared, but didn't speak. He stood behind Caleb like a child bracing for reprimand, clutching his phone, either calling someone or pretending to. Leo was trembling now, hands clutching his stomach. Elias recognized the signs. A panic-induced spasm. The boy was losing control of his breathing. Caleb didn't notice. "I'll make sure you never set foot in Atherton again. You parasite. Crawl back to the slums where you belong." Elias said nothing. He knelt, pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket, tucked it into Leo's small hand, and whispered in a low, steady voice, "You're okay. I'm here. Deep breath. 1, 2, that's it." The boy began to breathe easier. Just enough. It was time to leave. When security approached, Elias didn't resist. But he looked at Caleb. This time for real. Not like a man beneath him, but like a surgeon examining a scan of metastasis. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said, his voice unsettlingly calm, "you should be more worried about your son than about me." No one truly grasped the meaning. But Caleb froze. For the first time, he looked at Elias not as a piece of furniture in his polished world, but as a man. Elias walked away. No bowed head. No scum. Not a loser. Inside him, a door had opened. Not the door of revenge, but of surgery. Precise. Calculated. Every step planned. Elias Vance's final thought echoed like a scalpel snapping free from its sheath. Caleb Sterling just handed me the scalpel, and I'm going to use it to dissect the empire of fear and false virtue he built with blood and silence. Apartment 4C is a rundown building on the edge of Santa Monica. A small photograph sat on the worn dining table, its wooden frame chipped and the glass dulled with dust. Elias stared at it as if trying to retrieve a corrupted file from his mind, a memory of a paradise erased by a single word: fabrication. In the picture, he stood in a white coat beside a bright-eyed woman and a tiny girl clinging to his leg. His wife, his daughter, both gone. The lawsuit hadn't just stripped Elias of his medical license. It shattered his wife's faith in him. And within 6 months, cancer took what remained. From a doctor invited to lecture at Stanford, he became a shadow pushing a trash cart through the hallways of the school where the son of the man who destroyed his life now studied. The cruelest irony: Leo's middle name was Vance. A quiet insult Caleb likely never realized. Elias didn't cry. He had run out of tears years ago. Now, his mind held no emotion, only structure. Just like facing a complex brain surgery. Remove the tumor, protect the surrounding tissue. The next morning, a small article appeared in a local tabloid. Elite Academy's hidden threat. Janitor's troubling past. The word dangerous was never used outright, but every sentence whispered it. Former medical professional. Linked to a malpractice case. Hired without thorough background checks. Elias folded the paper and set it on the table. He wasn't surprised. He knew Caleb Sterling. Knew how vengeance could be wrapped in a velvet glove of respectability. Caleb didn't just want him gone. He wanted him erased like Elias had never existed. A private investigator had likely been hired. They'd dig through his past, searching for a single crack, any flaw, to destroy him completely. Elias rose slowly, opened the wooden cupboard, and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, his surgical log from the prime of his career. He turned to a blank page and began to write. Observe, record, analyze. His tools were no longer scalpels, but time and precision. He started studying Caleb the way one monitors a tumor in its early stages. He logged Caleb's pickup times, always late by at least 15 minutes. He recorded heated phone calls in the parking lot when no one was around. He memorized cruel words Caleb hurled at staff when the administration wasn't listening. But most telling were the fragments of conversations Caleb didn't know he was leaking. I told them to postpone the audit. The pension fund isn't their concern. The factory shutdown is legal. Don't worry. Elias didn't grasp every detail, but he recognized the tone of a man hiding something. And he knew better than anyone. Sometimes the death of a system starts with the quietest whispers. Then something unexpected happened. That afternoon, as Elias was cleaning the equipment room, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the roastery, 6 p.m. Isabella Rossi. Elias's heart paused. Isabella, the brightest student he had ever mentored. The one he defended before the disciplinary board after she botched a procedure during her first year of residency. She had cried like a child in the OR, and Elias took the fall for her. The roastery, 6 p.m. Isabella sat waiting. Not the timid resident he once knew, but now the chief of neurosurgery at a major hospital in San Francisco. Elegant white suit, same determined eyes, but deeper now, shaped by experience. She didn't waste time. I read that article. I know it's a lie. Elias said nothing. They're not just trying to take your job. They're trying to erase who you are, Elias. I'm not letting that happen. She placed a tablet on the table. On the screen, charts, PDFs, financial charts. Transactions from Sterling Capital. Suspicious transfers. I've been working with an investigative journalist. And this, she handed him a card, is the best financial crime attorney I know. Put a senator in prison. Elias looked at the data. The numbers, the flows, the loopholes. To anyone else, chaos. To him, it was a CT scan of a diseased body. And Caleb Sterling was the tumor metastasizing through it. He looked up, for the first time in years, his eyes sharp with clarity. The observation phase is over, he said. It's time for surgery. The third-floor library at Atherton on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting warm colors over the oak shelves. In a shadowed corner beyond the reach of surveillance cameras, Elias pretended to dust. On the other side of the bookshelf, a small boy curled up between stacks of American history books. Leo Sterling. No brucis, no tears. but his empty, bewildered eyes spoke volumes. Things no school report ever acknowledged. Mr. Elias. Leo's voice barely rose above a breath. I'm not good. Dad says I'm just like Mr. Vance is a failure. He made me sit in the dark room until I learned not to be weak anymore. Elias froze. Dark room. Leo nodded. Not with fear, but with the quiet resignation of a child who had already learned that love was conditional and kindness was a luxury. Elias sat beside him. He didn't press for details. He just placed a steady hand on the boy's back, a small gesture, but solid, like a spine holding up against the storm. In his pocket, a tiny microphone was recording everything. That night, Elias sent the 2-minute audio clip to Isabella. Just 2 minutes, but enough to peel back the mask of Caleb's carefully cultivated image, the doting father exposed for what he was. Isabella didn't ask questions. The next day, she arranged for Leo to meet privately with Dr. Harriet Lum, a leading expert in child trauma, in an unmarked office with no cameras or nameplates. The clinical report arrived in Elias's inbox that evening. Leo Sterling presents clear symptoms of chronic anxiety, trauma-induced emotional distress, and severe self-regulation impairments. At the bottom, a chilling conclusion: improvement is only possible if removed from the source of trauma. Caleb Sterling. Meanwhile, the financial surgery had begun. Elias and Isabella tracked transfers from Sterling Capital, veins feeding the tumor of Caleb's hypocrisy. They led to one name: Mayfield Ironworks, an old steel plant in the Rust Belt. It once employed over 300 workers, before being liquidated in 48 hours and restructured under a non-profit investment fund. Elias didn't go to the FBI. He didn't call reporters. He went to find Walter Briggs, a 63-year-old former employee who had lost his pension and home. Walter now lived in a trailer with his wife, who drove for Uber to make ends meet. When Elias arrived, the old man was patching a torn fabric chair. I don't need money, Elias said. I need you to stand up. Briggs scoffed. I stood once. They knocked me flat. Elias handed him a USB drive. Inside, a flowchart of shell corporations, proof of Sterling Capital breaking up the plant to dodge bankruptcy laws, and internal shareholder transfer contracts. No fights, Mr. Briggs. Just file the suit. I'll handle the rest. The next day, Walter Briggs filed a civil lawsuit in federal court, accusing Sterling Capital of financial fraud and collective asset theft. The press hadn't caught wind of it yet, but in financial circles, the first incision had been made. Caleb, of course, didn't sit idle. His private investigator had finally unearthed what Caleb believed was the silver bullet: the court documents from Elias's past case with Dr. Marcus Thorne. Caleb didn't verify. He just leaked. 3 days later, the Los Angeles Sentinel ran the headline: Atherton janitor exposed AS disgraced doctor stripped of license after patient death. Bold, brutal. No mention of the shady investigation, political interference, or the name Marcus Thorne. Just killer doctor turned elite school janitor. Elias sat alone in the library, staring at the headline. No one spoke, but everyone had seen it. No footsteps echoed between the shelves. No morning greetings. Just silence, thick and heavy, like the scent of blood in or after a failed surgery. He let out a soft chuckle. Good, he whispered. He dialed Isabella. He's made his move. Are you okay? She asked. He thinks he's writing my obituary, Elias said, closing his eyes, breathing deep. But in truth, he's writing his own confession. The annual gala of Atherton Preparatory Academy. The old building shimmered under California's night sky, its school banners fluttering gently in the breeze. Beneath the bronze statue of the school's founder, luxury cars arrived in a slow procession, releasing men in tuxedos and women draped in gowns worth tens of thousands. Inside the grand hall, a world of crystal chandeliers and clinking wine glasses. Sweet compliments flowed like honey, and handshakes came with hidden blades. Tonight, Caleb Sterling would be honored as Philanthropist of the Year. A silver trophy, a pre-written speech, a room full of applause waiting on cue. He entered like royalty, golden smile, Italian-cut tuxedo, and beside him, Leo Sterling, a shadow of a boy, trailing behind like an afterthought. 7:30 p.m. On hundreds of guests' phones, a push notification lit up. The New York Times, blood, steel, and sterling. A billionaire empire built on stolen pensions. A sprawling investigation. With photos. With numbers. With sworn testimony from Walter Briggs, shell company diagrams, and verified financial transfers. In under a minute, whispers spread like an invisible blaze. Caleb, still smiling, was shaking hands with a senator. 1 minute later, that same senator refused the next handshake. 7:35 p.m. Caleb stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, forcing a smile like nothing had happened. But his voice trembled. Ladies and gentlemen, it is such an honor to be recognized. The grand doors at the back of the hall opened. A group walked in. No sirens, no flashbulbs. 3 officials from California Child Protective Services, a uniformed officer, and a woman with long black hair, Dr. Harriet Lum, child psychologist. No shouting, no spotlight. They walked calmly toward Leo's table. The room froze. We have a court order, one of the women announced clearly. This child is to be removed to a safe location immediately. Caleb roared, "What? No one touches my son." But Leo didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He rose, stepped forward, and took Dr. Lum's hand as if he'd waited his whole life for this moment. And for the first time, Leo held his head high. 7:40 p.m. The spotlight shifted. A man entered through the main doors, not in a faded janitor's uniform, but a sharp navy blue suit. At his wrist, an old watch, the last relic of a once brilliant past. Elias Vance. No one stopped him. No one could. He walked to the stage, eyes not seeking sympathy or praise. Only focus. The gaze of a surgeon entering the OR. He took the microphone. His voice wasn't loud, wasn't forceful, but it carried, and it shook the room. Tonight, we honor a man for what he gave. But have we ever asked what he took? A whisper, a skipped heartbeat, a truth as sharp and clinical as a scalpel cutting into the artery of his polished system. Elias paused, eyes locked on Caleb, not with hatred, but with the quiet sorrow of a man who recognizes a disease that still thinks it's alive. Caleb lost control. He's a fraud. He killed a patient. He lost his license. You're going to believe? A janitor. The hall stayed silent. And then, the screen behind the stage lit up. A video, pre-recorded. A man appeared in a worn suit, gray-haired, weighed down with remorse. Dr. Marcus Thorne. Elite. That surgery, I ruined it. I panicked. Elias knew. But instead of exposing me, he stayed silent for the patient. I stole his research. I let him take the blame for 15 years. I don't deserve to be a doctor. Truth needs no defense. It stands on its own. The whispers vanished. Caleb Sterling stood alone on stage, stripped. No title, no son, no musk. Just a rotting man dragged into the light like a tumor excised from healthy flesh. He screamed, but no one listened anymore. He stumbled, and then he fell. Elias didn't smile, didn't gloat. He stood there, silent, as if he'd just completed emergency surgery. And he knew this patient was far too late to save. But the system wasn't, and the next generation still could be. A clear Monday morning. Sunlight streamed through the library windows at Atherton, casting a golden glow over worn book pages. There were no more cruel whispers, no more looks of pity or quiet suspicion. Only peace, and something new beginning to grow, like a seed sprouting from ashes. Elias Vance stood in the middle of it all, not with a mop this time. He wore a crisp white shirt, a soft gray tie, and a new name badge. Elias Vance, Director, Vance Foundation for Ethics and Integrity in Education. The foundation had been established just 2 weeks after the gala. It started as a quiet apology from a few awakened parents. Then it spread. Hundreds more joined in. Parents, alumni, private academies across California. No one asked Elias to return to medicine, and he didn't need to. That morning, he spoke to the entire student body. Not from a stage, not over the loudspeakers, but in the very room where he had once been invisible. He didn't give a lecture on anatomy or ethics. He told a story about buildings. Some buildings are made of marble. Their facades are grand, but their foundations are built on fear and selfishness. They collapse with the first wind. Then there are other buildings, plain, unadorned, but strong because they are built with compassion and courage. You are the architects of your own character, and the only thing that defines you isn't your parents' bank account, not your zip code, but how you treat someone who has nothing to offer in return. The room fell silent, not from pressure, but from reverence. Leo Sterling sat in the front row beside his mother. His face is no longer downcast, hair neatly trimmed, uniform crisp, and his smile, for the first time, like sunshine breaking through a storm. The woman beside him, Caleb's ex-wife, had filed for divorce the day after the gala. Now, she was Leo's sole legal guardian. As Elias stepped down, Leo raised his hand. "Dr. Vance," he called, voice clear and full of life. "Are you going to be a surgeon again someday?" The room chuckled softly. Elias paused, looked at the boy, not from above, but stepped down and knelt so they were eye to eye. "Now, I never stopped being a surgeon. A surgeon's job is to heal. Sometimes that means a body. Sometimes it means a system that's rotted from within. And sometimes the most important thing is helping a brave boy find his voice again." There was no applause, only silence, sacred, like the stillness after a successful surgery, when the alarm stops beeping and the patient breathes on their own again. In that silence, Elias stood, resting a hand on Leo's shoulder, not as a hero, but as a teacher who saw the future in a child's eyes. 1 week later, a new plaque appeared at the rear entrance of the Atherton Library, the Vance Rossi Reading Room, for those learning to see the world with their hearts. There, no one cared who your parents were. No one counted donations. Only books. And respect. Elias Vance never returned to the operating room, but he had performed the most precise surgery of his life. In a society poisoned by pride, on a system built on prejudice, on a child silenced by fear, on a truth buried beneath shame. He had cut through it all, and he had healed it, not with glory, not with titles, but with a generation that now knew how to stand for justice, whether in silence or under a spotlight. Justice isn't revenge. It's the restoration of moral order. And dignity, once it stands tall, cannot be brought down by any force. You've just witnessed a journey not of power, but of dignity. A man stripped of everything, his name, his profession, his honor, chose not to fight back with fists, but with truth. Not to destroy with anger, but to dissect with wisdom. Not to overthrow, to take power, but to heal and transform. Elias Vance didn't need to return to the peak of prestige, because he became the one lifting others buried by the system. And sometimes that is the highest peak of all. Leo is no longer the trembling boy in the library, but a living reminder that when one adult stands up for a child, not with power, but with courage, a new world begins to be written. What moment moved you most in this story? Was it when Elias stood on that stage with nothing but truth? Or when Leo finally lifted his head high? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. And if you believe justice isn't a flash of headlines, but the quiet right choices made every day, like, share, and subscribe to Toch Story. Because here, we tell the stories the world is too busy to hear, but your heart should never forget. We'll see you in the next story, where ordinary people choose to be extraordinary by standing up when no one else will.